Hey YouTube, Tom Houston with Tom Houston Photography here, and in this video I'm going to go over a list of things I made to help you make your photos sharper. And this came from someone asking me how he can make his photos more sharper. So the first three things are from aperture, shutter speed, and ISO, which I have covered in my videos, so I'll go over them fairly quickly. First is your shutter speed. So if you have a faster shutter speed, you can minimize the effects of camera shake, just holding your camera and it wobbling around, as well as if your subject is moving, a faster shutter speed will catch them and freeze their motion so that they will be sharp and not blurry, because if you take a picture of someone running, you don't have a fast enough shutter speed to freeze the motion, it will show motion and therefore be blurry. Next is ISO. So ISO won't really make it less sharp, it will just make it, the pixels look a little more wonky, and therefore you'll lose some detail because of the noise. It won't look as crisp, as sharp, I guess. So having a low ISO instead of bumping up your ISO will make your photos appear to be sharper. Next is aperture. It does two things. First, it controls your depth of field. So if you're taking a picture of a female portrait, you want a small depth of field, and usually, therefore their eyes will be very sharp, hopefully, and then everything else will go out of focus. If you want all of them in focus, you just increase your aperture. However, depending on the lens, each lens is different. The aperture can also, there's usually a sweet spot in the aperture of a lens, which means there's one aperture value where the lens is at its peak sharpness. So most lenses, that varies between like f5.6 to f11. You can look up the different charts and stuff like that, or just look on blogs or forums on where the sweet spot of your lens is, and that will help you take photos at the maximum sharpness for your depth of field. So it depends on where the sweet spot of your lens is, and with your lens there's usually spots where it's a little soft. So I know with my 85 1.4D, I've noticed that it's kind of soft at f2. I don't know if that's just my copy or I just wasn't taking a good photo at the time, but I took a lot of photos at f2 and they just weren't quite as sharp as I wanted. So sometimes there can be aperture values of lenses that aren't quite as sharp as you would want. And moving on to the next one on my list is using a tripod. So right now my camera's on a tripod so that there's no shake or whatever, so I'm not blurry. However, if you don't have a tripod, you can sometimes get away with just putting your camera down on a stable surface somewhere. So I put my camera on rocks before at waterfalls when I didn't have a tripod. When I was in Cambodia taking pictures of the sunrise at Angkor Wat, I just put my camera down on a stone wall. So you don't always have to have a tripod, but it is useful because then you can use a slower shutter speed and always make sure that whatever you're taking a picture of is sharp, so you don't have camera shake using a slow shutter speed. Next is your lens, so that also ties in with the aperture. Different lenses have different sweet spots. Also, older lenses can sometimes be a little soft than newer lenses, just due to optics and their age. Next is cropping. So some people crop their photos a lot. This is usually not super recommended, but nowadays with the amount of megapixels cameras have, it's not the end of the world. But some people still think it's a bad form. Anyways, when you crop your photo, you're losing information, and it's the same as just doing a digital zoom on your photo. And the pixels get larger, and therefore your photo can lose its sharpness and its detail. So if you're cropping your photos a lot and you're finding your photos aren't as sharp, then I would recommend working on your composition of your photos and trying to get closer to whatever you're taking photos of, and that might give you better results. As I mentioned, megapixels. Nowadays it's not much of an issue because most cameras have more than enough megapixels. My D90 has 12 megapixels, and I have printed out photos 2 by 3 feet, and they are perfectly fine, super sharp. And that was with one of them I printed out was with my kit lens. So 12 megapixels is more than enough for sharpness in that sense. Some some cameras have less than 10, and those aren't usually as good for printing, but anything over 10, you're laughing. And nowadays, cameras going over 20, it's almost ridiculous now. Next is your focusing, so how well you can focus the photo. So first you can use your camera's autofocus dynamic thing, so it will just take a best guess of where you want to focus, and it would do that for you. Sometimes it's off, so take the photo, look at it, think it's okay, and then go back, put it on your computer and find out that it's actually not, or wherever you actually wanted to be in focus wasn't. A way around this is to use single point autofocus, and that is to actually allow you to control which autofocus point you want your camera to focus on. This gives you more control about where you want your photo in focus, which might help make your photos sharper depending on why your photos might not be sharp. And lastly is how you edit the photos. Sometimes if you over edit photos, you can lose detail in things, depending on what it is. The other thing is what file system you use for your photos. So if you use JPEG, it's good. However, your camera does do some editing and some sharpening in camera, so you don't have full control of your editing with JPEG. And also with JPEGs, the more you save it and the more times you copy it. So if you copy it to a hard drive and then delete it off your computer and then put it back onto your computer from your hard drive and you keep saving the same copy, it will slowly degrade over time. Whereas if you shoot RAW or TIFF, that won't happen. So RAW photos will maintain their data because it's not being compressed in the same way as a JPEG, same with TIFFs. And with RAW photos, you have full control over editing. So RAW photos will be a little bit not as detailed or sharp when you first get them. However, you can always sharpen them in post, which is the point of shooting RAW, is you have full control over sharpening and other things. So I would say that's my list to what I could think of when I wrote it to help people get sharper photos. Again, there could be a wide range of reasons that you're not getting sharp photos. These are just some of them. And they can be even simpler things like you just have a smudge on your lens or something like that, which also can affect how sharp your photos are. So all in all, that's my list. Hope that helps, and if you have any questions about any of that stuff, I'll be more than happy to help them out, but I hope that helps you get sharper photos. Cheers.